A couple of weeks ago, I made a video showcasing the amazing Outer Planets mod, which adds an additional gas giant to the Kerbol system, Sarnus, analogue of Saturn, and two ice giants, Urlum and Neidon, to represent Neptune and Uranus, all of which featuring numerous moons, as well as a Pluto analogue, Plok. And in my first Outer Planets mod video, I decided to go to the outermost planet in the Outer Planets mod, the aforementioned Plok, because I don't know, just seemed like a good idea at the time, I guess. But many of you wanted me to visit somewhere else, specifically Tekto, moon of Sarnus, analogue of Titan, moon of Saturn. It's a mysterious and green world with a toxic atmosphere and lakes of presumably methane, just like the real Titan. Except for the green part, I guess. Now, I did consider doing Tekto as my premiere mission with Outer Planets, but I'm glad that I didn't, as it turned out that in my first video, a lot of my mods weren't really working too well together when I did the Plok mission, and there were some visual glitches and stuff that meant I couldn't have deferred rendering installed, nor could I have Parallax Continued's unofficial Outer Planets configs running. Happily, I have since reinstalled all of these mods, and they seem to be getting along much better now, and so I can go to Tekto with full beautification mods running. Deferred rendering, Parallax Continued, the Outer Planets configs for black racks, volumetric clouds, and a bunch more. Just see the description for a full list of mods used in this video. Now, for the vehicle itself, which is coming together on screen, I decided to keep it fully stock. Well, I've got Restock installed, but it's stock components, and I'd have a nice beefy lander that can land on Tekto, as well as a crewed quadcopter. In fact, it's the quadcopter that is just being finalized on screen right now. The quadcopter is kind of a spiritual successor to the Lathe helicopter I made last week. While the vehicle worked really well, I did have a hard time flying it because I had bound the rotor's RPM limit to the main throttle as a means to control the vehicle, which resulted in fairly significant input lag and made it very hard to safely land the helicopter without using the unbreakable joints cheat and the no crash damage cheat. However, I gotta give big thanks to commenter Rickyamedio, I think is how you say that name, who gave me a tip that instead of assigning the main throttle to the RPM limit, instead assign the blade's pitch to the main throttle, which gives a much more instantaneous response, and it's the way real helicopters work. So thank you, that's what I did for this craft, and yeah, it works a real treat. I won't be needing to use the no crash damage or unbreakable joints cheats for this one. But yeah, there's the lander pretty much done. It's powered by two Aerospike engines, which in retrospect was probably a bit overkill. I think just one would have been enough, but we do need a lot of fuel. According to my trusty Delta V map, we need 2,600 meters per second to return from the surface of Tekto to orbit, with some fuel left over to assist with the landing burn and the maneuver burns in orbit to rendezvous with the mothership. That being said, I do think this 2,600 number is a bit of an overestimate, as I actually had less fuel than this in the final mission that you're going to see, and I still made it to orbit with a lot of fuel to spare. So, this is a learning experience, right? Like with my Plok video, this was my first ever attempt at reaching Tekto. I filmed take one, and so I really had no idea what to expect. So I used the Delta V map to calculate how much fuel the mothership would need, and it turned out I'd need just under 6 kilometers per second of Delta V to reach low Tekto orbit, starting from low Kerbin orbit. I suspected that this was a massive overestimate again, but nevertheless I designed a transfer vehicle that could hold an enormous amount of liquid fuel so that I would definitely not run out during the filming of the mission. And yeah, it was once again way too much. But again, this is a learning experience, and I feel like this is a good opportunity for you guys to see me playing KSP where I don't really know what I'm doing and just trying to over-engineer crafts to be able to brute force their way through any issues. And as I accrue knowledge of the Outer Planet system, maybe a Sarnus 5 challenge could be on the cards. Like Joule, stock analogue of Jupiter, Sarnus has 5 moons, so there's a potential challenge of doing a Sarnus 5 challenge, just like Joule 5. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below if you think that's a good idea. And actually, speaking of leaving video ideas for me, did you know that this is technically my 998th video that I'm uploading to YouTube? We are very close to the 1K video special, so what should it be? I really don't know what to do. So I'm all ears. So leave comments down below, guys. Anyway, the rocket is basically complete now. I'm just adding a big dumb booster for the first and I guess the second stage. The only other things to note, I did add a 4-seat crew module as part of the mothership's kind of build. and it had a little sticker to the side of it that said cryogenic storage. So this is going to be a very, very long old trip, because Sarnus is even further away from Kerbol than Jool, which is the furthest planet from the sun. I guess apart from Elu, actually. I keep thinking of Elu as like a moon, not a moon, a dwarf planet, because Pluto is So it's going to be a long old trip. So the canon of this episode, and I guess this vehicle, is that the Kerbols will, go into the cryogenic chamber and remain in stasis for the long duration time between burns. Anyway, there's the sticker. I'm placing it there. Then adding a few more little insignias you don't need to see. We can just go to the tracking station and time warp to a Sarnus transfer window, which again, I don't actually know what that is, so I can't tell you, or draw a line from Kerbin to the sun to Sarnus, the angle that line forms at the sun, blah, blah, blah. I didn't know, so I'm using Kerbol alarm clock, which is technically the correct way of doing this. So basically, we can set the sun as our transfer parent, Kerbin as the origin, Sarnus as the destination, and as you can see, we have to time warp 282 days, and some amount of hours and minutes that have now gone, so don't know. So you can see Sarnus is kind of the like the beige planet, sort of sitting way beyond Jool, but before Urlum and Neidon. Long old way. The closest planet to the sun we can even see in this shot here actually is Juno, and obviously Kerbin is even closer to that. So we've got a long old distance to cover, but we have basically made it to the transfer window time. So it's time now to do a fade across, go through the clouds, and there is. This is so overkill. This rocket is massive. Admire the rocket on the launch pad and launch. So we're off to a blazing start. We have 4 Kerbols on board. We've got Jebediah, Bill Kerman, Bob Kerman, and Valentina Kerman, although her little portrait is invisible at the bottom right of the screen, but she is there, I show you guys. Now, you can see we've got the big fairing at the top, but then the command modules, so we've got 3-seat one and a 1-seat one to accommodate 4 Kerbols, are exposed, and that's because in the event of failure, because look at this rocket, it's so big, and there's so many points of failure on it, that we can activate the launch escape system and pull the capsule to safety, and the Kerbols will survive. However, I don't have the conventional launch escape tower. I've instead got a Starliner / Crew Dragon style setup of having just some solid rocket motors on the sides of the capsule. You may have seen me place them during the build. Obviously, because I'm filming this mission, the mission was a success, but we will get to use those Separatrons for the final kind of staging event of this mission when we separate the capsule from the rest of the rocket during Kerbin re-entry. So you'll get to see that in action. We also have these Separatrons. There we are. How good was that timing? Just to kind of pull the first stage away from the second stage. Didn't really pull it away very quickly, but put it away, a bit nonetheless. So now we can continue our ascent to low Kerbin orbit. In fact, I don't believe that this second stage will actually get us all the way to orbit. In fact, I'm looking at the screen now and the numbers don't quite add up, so it won't. So we'll just do the final circularization using the 8 nuclear engines. And in fact, it's a good thing that we're not going to circularize with this stage, because you guys know me right now. I never like leaving space junk in space. Sometimes I watch my old videos from 2016 and 2017 and cringe as I'm staging these big liquid fuel tanks in deep space, doing untold damage to the solar bears and space dolphins. So, yep, keeping things nice and safe and not cluttering up the solar system. Hence why I just have that giant monolithic block for a liquid fuel stage. It could be a lot smaller if I use asparagus staging or something like that. But again, trying to keep space clean, keeping things simple. Less staging check as well, in fact. And of course, speaking of staging, we're about to stage the second stage now. And there we are. Fairings are deployed. Second stage is tumbling away as we continue our approach to orbit. Our apoapsis has just passed the Kármán line, in fact, or the Kármán line, whatever the stock name of that is. And yeah, I aim for an apoapsis of about 100 kilometers, just because our escape burn is going to be very long. If the apoapsis that we have, or I guess just the orbital height we have, is too low, we'll end up starting the burn and ending up forcing our periapsis into Kerbin's atmosphere. So we kind of need it to be nice and high. So I feel like 100 kilometers, it's a bit higher than you need, but it's just a nice round number to aim for, I guess. And there we are. We have almost completely circularized. We do have a periapsis, but it's only 48 kilometers, so not quite out of the atmosphere. Just going to do a quick time warp up and do that final circularization burn, starting now. There we are. And boom. We are now in a stable, low Kerbin orbit. In this particular shot, actually, you can see the lander just there as I'm closing its surface bay, and you can get a brief view of its landing legs. I mean, you saw them in the build time-lapse as well. But basically, guys, I'm just fed up with the stock landing leg behavior in Kerbal Space Program, where if you land on any sort of inclination, which is most of the time, the lander will just slide around. It doesn't really stay in place. I think there are mods that change the stock landing gear grip ability or grip amount, but in an update, maybe it was Breaking Ground, maybe it was a an update for the core game, I'm not quite sure, the squad added grip pads, and so I've started making like custom landing legs using the robotic hinge pieces, girder part, and grip pads, and as the name grip pads suggests, they're very, very grippy. So when you build landing legs using, girder pieces and grip pads, landers sort of stay in place much better. And for those that know, Tekto, as I learned during some testing, is very, very hilly. It's quite a difficult place to land on, much harder than Lathe in my opinion. Although not quite as much of its surface is covered by liquid, the land of Tekto is very, very, there's no real flat areas. I mean, there are some places on the shores that are quite flat, but generally speaking, it's very, very mountainous. So I was like, what's going to happen is we're going to just parachute down and then land somewhere that's on a really, really bad slope. And then we'll have to sort of kick up and then fly around on the surface a bit to relocate to a flatter location so our Kerbals can go on EVA and do all the things that Kerbals do when they're on EVA. So that's my plan. That's why I've got those big grip pad robotic arm landing legs instead of normal ones. The chief disadvantage of landing legs like this is that they are very, very heavy. So I've actually got them attached to decouplers. So we're going to do an Eve lander style liftoff where we're going to kick off the ground and then immediately dump them to give us a bit of extra delta V. In fact, we got I can't remember what it was, but it was over 200 meters per second of delta V gained just from ditching the landing legs. So yeah, they are very heavy, but they're very useful, especially for a very hilly place like Tekto. So wait for it. There we are. We have left Kerbin's sphere of influence and are now orbiting Kerbol. I mean, I guess we always technically were, but you know what I mean, guys. So now we're going to plot our mid-course correction burn, because just like Joule, Sarnus is on a bit of an inclined orbit around the sun, and so we need to do a mid-course correction burn in order to encounter it. Now, Tekto is that really far away moon, the light green one just there. Now, we do have the delta V to just do a direct Tekto encounter and just circularize around it. But I thought, the nice thing about going to a dual moon is that you can use Tylo to do a gravity assist to sling you into a stable dual orbit for very, very little delta V. And I thought, what, I wonder if there is an equivalent moon for Sarnus. So you might have seen the escape menu pop up a few seconds ago. That was me basically pressing escape, pausing my recording, and then going to the KSP Copernicus wiki and seeing kind of what the gravity of the Sarnus's moons are like, and seeing if there is any possibility of doing a gravity assist. Like I say, this was my first ever mission going to Sarnus, so I kind of wanted to use it as a learning opportunity to see if I can do any cool little tricks. And as you can see, I was able to do a cool little trick. We can use this planet that I've suddenly forgot the name of, Slate. Slate is the name of the planet. I basically opened up the wiki page for all of the Sarnus moons and just compared them all, basically. And the wiki, I'm now just going to read it because I'm lazy and I can't bother to, reword it. Slate is the fourth moon of Sarnus and is a rocky, atmosphereless body with some unique features and implications. It is slightly smaller than Kerbin, with just over 2/3 of the surface gravity. Due to its mass, it is very easy to achieve an orbital encounter with Slate. So I was like, Slate seems like the perfect candidate to try and do a gravity assist to sling us into a stable Sarnus orbit. And as you can see, we were able to. So I did say earlier that this ship had massively more delta V than it needed because I used the delta V map that I may or may not have used correctly. That's what I needed so much. But I have saved a lot of fuel, I guess, by doing a Slate gravity assist. Didn't need to, but again, just want to try and learn things. This is kind of how you guys can hone your skills, get better at gravity assists, just by trying things out, seeing what works. And yeah, and obviously this was kind of easy for me because I'm so used to doing this kind of thing with Tylo, so it wasn't really much. It wasn't really a different really for doing the Slate encounter. But still, there we are. We are now capturing, well, not capturing, but you know what I mean, our course orbital line is showing a stable Sarnus orbit following our slate encounter. Now, I'm using the RCS controls here just to try and force a Tekto encounter, but it was really, really tricky. As you can see, the grey target indicators were sort of flashing, and it was really flickery, and I thought this is just not stable enough to accurately plot an encounter with anything. So I think I just left it there. I thought, let's just circularize, do the slate gravity assist, and then figure out how to get to Tekto from there. So just watching the map screen here, waiting for our Sarnus encounter to happen, and there we are. We are now captured. Well, not captured, but we've entered Sarnus's sphere of influence. There it is. Little beige ball in the distance. We can time warp down, and it rapidly comes into view. And look how beautiful it looks. Saturn is the jewel of our solar system, and I think it's fair to say that Sarnus is very much the jewel of this solar system. And I mean jewel as in jewel, not jewel as in jewel. You know what I mean? Like Jewl rather than Jool. I guess because, you know, jewel is the jewel of the system, but Sarnus is the jewel of the system. To anyone that doesn't play KSP, that's a really weird sentence to say. And frankly, people that do play KSP, it's probably a weird sentence as well. But anyway, moving along swiftly, as you can see, we are now sort of plotting our way towards Tekto. There it is. With my mods installed, it's not quite as green as it is for other people's videos. Like Stratzenblitz has done quite a few videos to Tekto. Much more impressive ones than this one, to be fair, guys. So go ahead and watch those. He did one about 7 months ago, like sending an aircraft carrier to Tekto. What a phenomenal video. Literally, I have no words. It's one of the best videos I've ever seen in my life. So, yeah, definitely go watch that. I'll link it in the description. Not that, like, Stratzenblitz 75 needs any introduction on this channel. But, yeah, if you've not seen it, you know, now maybe you didn't watch it because you didn't know what Tekto was. But now I have given you this brilliant educational piece of art to show you what Tekto is. Now you'll appreciate that video a lot more. For me, it's not even the fact it was Tekto, or it wasn't even the engineering of the craft itself. It was just getting the shots for that mission. Like, he had craft flying next to each other and around each other, and one of the craft was very, very big. Obviously, it's Stratzenblitz 75 videos, of course, and I was like, that frame rate would have been, like, less than 1 per second, probably. So be able to perform those kind of acrobatics and land things and dock things together whilst working with those kind of performance issues, my hats off. I just could never have the patience. I remember once I did try and showcase like a really large craft that I downloaded from Kerbol X. I said, I'm just going to download the biggest craft I can find on Kerbol X and showcase it. And literally, it took me like half an hour for it to take off from the runway. And then something glitched out, I had to do it again. And literally, it's just not for me, guys. I just do not have the patience for that. I have done a showcase of a really big craft that had low performance before. It was a 747 aircraft carrier, which was a real concept, by the way, before air-to-air refueling sort of made airborne aircraft carriers unfeasible or, you know, pointless. But, you know, that was a really arduous one to film, and even that was like, it was like 5 FPS, so it's pretty manageable. So I don't know how Stratzenblitz does it. Anyway, sort of been showering another YouTuber with praise rather than talk about my own YouTube video, which is, of course, circularizing around Tekto. So you might be wondering, why have I got such a high apoapsis, or such a high orbital height? Our apoapsis is still quite high, but we're going to be circularizing. I'm aiming for a kind of orbital altitude of 110 kilometers, which seems very extreme, right? That's extreme for a Kerbin orbit. And that's because Tekto's atmosphere extends really, really high. So the Kerman line for Kerbin is 70 kilometers. So I assumed that it would be less than that for Tekto, because Tekto is a smaller celestial body. So I think for reference to the other bodies, so Kerbin's atmosphere ends at 70 kilometers, Eve's ends at 80, I think, or 90, but Eve is kind of, what's Eve, isn't it? Juno ends at 50. Oh, this is really bad, I don't even know. Is late 50 as well? I don't know. Basically, the point I'm trying to make is that Tekto's atmosphere ends at 95 kilometers, which is more than, like, Eve. So it's really, 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 like, large atmosphere, which is why we have to have an orbital height of such great altitude. But anyway, kind of rambled my way through any kind of being able to talk about anything, but here we are deorbiting the lander. So we've got these 2 dedicated landing engines that we can conserve as much fuel for the ascent as possible by having a separate deorbit stage, not landing. I think I said landing engines, didn't I? These are the deorbit engines. I went for kind of a bit too aggressive of a descent profile there, so I raised our periapsis to 20 kilometers. Seemed like a nice round number. I would say this, guys, I did a couple of quick saves and found that I kept landing in the sea. So I kept on just like adjusting my re-entry, well, not re-entry, my entry profile until we were at a point where we would be landing on the land. And yeah, now we are descending down. So this lander, and most Tekto landers, I guess, will really want to flip out because we've got those, what are they called, fins at the bottom. So this thing really wants to spin out of control. So we've got those air brakes at the top just to keep things stable, making sure we have engines pointing down. Didn't actually last for long, though. We will end up flipping out, but that ended up having a good advantage, which you'll see in just a second. But yeah, we've got some little storms happening underneath, the courtesy of the volumetric clouds outer planets mod config. But yeah, we're starting to spin out of control a bit more, and we've got the parachutes deployed now to keep us upright for a bit, but it isn't going to last for long. The parachutes obviously haven't fully deployed. They haven't, like, I don't even know what the term is, but you know when they're in this state and then they fully open up later on, and that really slows you down. So for now, we're just nosediving down to the ground. This is pretty good because now I can do this nifty little trick. We can detach the quadcopter, which will automatically deploys its parachutes as well, to separate the two vehicles so that they don't land stuck together, basically, because the quadcopter was mounted underneath the lander. I figured it would have been difficult to get it to kind of, well, to move it from underneath the lander without damaging anything or using cheats. So I've separated them both, and now the parachutes have fully deployed. We can, well, the lander just rights itself up, I guess, and then we can deploy our custom landing legs, and that's just a case of time warping down, which took absolutely ages in real life. But for you guys, it'll be fine because I can just use the power of video editing and speed the footage up. I don't need to speed the footage up too much for the lander itself because we're descending at a very brisk 5.2 meters per second, which is very fast. Now, I'm going to do a little trick just here. So, again, I had to do a sort of, you might have seen the quick save menu appearing just there. I did a stealth quick load just there because we're coming down on a course that's going to land us on a very steep slope. So what I did was I cut two of the parachutes, got Jebediah Kerbol out on EVA, repacked those two parachutes, and then bound their deployment to an action group. So that means what we can do is when we land on the slope, we can sort of kick ourselves up with the engines. We'll then start flipping out of control because this lander is horrible for flying in any direction other than straight up. But then we can just sort of vaguely point ourselves towards a flat area, which you can sort of see just there, 180 degrees away from us on the nav ball. Once we're roughly over it, we can then deploy the now repacked parachutes and touch down on another hill. I didn't do this very well, but we can kind of repeat this process as many times as necessary. Well, I guess not as many times as necessary because we do only have a limited amount of fuel. We do need most of this fuel for our takeoff to reach Tekto orbit again. But yeah, that's kind of that was the little trick I did for repositioning our lander. You might be a bit worried about, oh, where's the quadcopter in all of this? The quadcopter is so light that the parachutes are bringing it down very slowly. I think it was descending at something like 1 or 2 meters per second at most. So we had plenty of time to play around with the lander, trying to get it into the perfect position here. Just then, I panned the camera up just to check on the whereabouts of the lander and the quadcopter, I should say. And it was fine. And then now, hopefully, that's probably the final burn we can do without expending too much fuel. But look at that. How good is this for a landing location, guys? So I have the Life Tekto patch installed. So with Parallax Continued, I should say, in the stock game, you can have Eve or Lifeless Eve. So Eve, by default in Parallax, has loads of like fauna and bubbles on the surface, or you can have the Lifeless Eve patch installed, which makes it more barren. And there's a similar thing for the Outer Planets patch for Parallax. So you can have normal Tekto, which is what I've got installed, or Lifeless Tekto. But I thought non-lifeless Tekto looks nice. We've got plants and fauna, lots of things to explore. This was the really tedious part of this end, guys. So yeah, it's not happening too fast, is it? We can just now speed the footage up to be really fast. Are you ready? Whoa, we are coming down very quickly. Yeah, I think that took like 15 minutes in real life. Now we're coming down to a not ideal spot just here. And we don't have any connection to the KSC because I forgot to add a commutron to this thing. And I guess my plan was it would land near the lander anyway, so Jebediah can just get on board, and then it doesn't matter if we don't have a connection to the KSC because Jebediah can just control it. But and that didn't end up happening. So what I did, well, first of all, I had to sort of grit my teeth and hope that nothing blew up whilst it was tumbling down the hill just there. It's rolling down the hill does look a bit more exaggerated for you guys because the footage is sped up. But what we can do, once it's stable, we can then just, I just disabled ComNet in the difficulty options. So I'm like, in my head, Jebediah Kerman is in the crew, like the lander, which is less than a kilometer away, so there would theoretically be range to communicate, and there's no, like, you know, obstructions like a mountain in the way. So Jebediah Kerman is now in there with a little remote control, just controlling this himself. So that's how I justify turning off ComNet for the purposes of relocating this lander. So apologies if you don't like this, but I couldn't be bothered to continue tumbling it down the hill. Now, as you can see, it took me a while to sort of get used to the controls. So as I mentioned, I've bound the throttle to the deploy pitch of the rotors. That's why you can see the rotors. If you can tell, the rotor's pitches is changing to kind of give us more or less throttle. The RPM limit I've bound to H and N, which usually is forwards and backwards for RCS thrusters. So that's how I'm kind of helping to control this vehicle. So hopefully you'll find that my flying skill with this thing improves throughout this mission, because I'll be visiting a couple of places, because Tekto is a really interesting old place. I don't really want to rely on a rover, because rovers kind of suck in Kerbal Space Program, like wheel physics is terrible. But I want to kind of visit other places. So namely, we've obviously got our main landing site. I wanted to visit the top of a mountain, and I also wanted to visit the shores of a methane lake. So that's what we're going to do with the quadcopter. So Jebediah Kerman is obviously going to do that. But lest I get ahead of myself, first things first, of course, is deploying our ladders and then running all of our science experiments. Again, I don't need to, because like we've got a full tech tree unlocked. I feel like it's just, you know, it's more about doing the thing that you do in Kerbal Space Program, which of course is running science, gathering surface samples, doing EVA reports, all that shebang, and of course planting our flag, which I don't forget. Don't worry, I won't forget to do. But we've got Bob Kerman there, our resident scientist, taking all of the data from not just the experiments in the service bay, but also the atmospheric analysis device. I don't know what it's actually called. Maybe it's just called that, but whatever. And then a graceful little backflip onto his spine upon reaching the end of the ladder. And then, yeah, we can go ahead and deploy our flag. Now, I thought that Tekto, because its atmosphere is so high, it would have really high surface gravity, such that, just like in places like Lathe and sort of like Juna, the RCS packs wouldn't work. So I wanted to make sure we had a ladder that extended all the way from the cockpit down to the surface that Kerbals can use, so they don't need to rely on their RCS packs to get back onto the lander. But luckily, Tekto, the RCS packs actually work really well, which is just as well because the ladder didn't really work. Like the little A10 Thunderbolt style ladder, you know, the little yellow one. By the way, I don't know if I've just blown anyone's minds, but that's what that yellow ladder is based on. It's based on the, can I get a picture on screen? The A10 Thunderbolts ladder. Now you know. But yeah, transitioning from the normal ladders to that ladder, the Kerbals couldn't really do it, so that was kind of annoying. So luckily the RCS packs worked. Otherwise, I don't know what I would have done. Maybe I had to use the quadcopter to creatively get the Kerbals up onto the lander. I'm not sure. Anyway, speaking of the quadcopter, it is time to begin the adventure of Jebediah Kerman in the quadcopter, as I mentioned earlier. Yeah, as you can see, my flying skills aren't perfect with this thing. You'll see it kind of doing spins and flips and backwards and forwards. I'm trying to get used to the controls. And also trying to strike the perfect balance between RPM limit and rotor deployment to get the best possible control. So yeah, apologies for the very janky flying, but hey, it's part of the fun, isn't it? Anyway, yeah, as you can see, I'm very, very clumsily trying to get to the shoreline of what I assume is a methane lake, or is it kethane in Kerbal Space Program? Not sure. No, anyone says methane or kethane, that's not how you pronounce it in the UK, which is where I'm from, so thank you very much. I'm not pronouncing it wrong. I did chemistry A-level. I didn't do very well in chemistry A-level. It was definitely my weakest subject, but I did it nonetheless, and you know, I got into university, so that's what matters. And yeah, here we are slowly touching down, although this won't be our final touchdown point, at least for the lake part of this mission, because I wanted to get a little bit closer. As you can see, it's a bit of a walk for the Kerbal, and Kerbals, they don't really walk, or I guess waddle would be a better description of how they move very quickly. So I got out and I was like, you know what, I can't be bothered to walk that distance. Let's get a little bit closer to the shoreline. And then, yes, after we've done our little trip to the shores, which I guess we're kind of completing now, we'll do a trip to the top of a nearby mountain, just so we've kind of covered the range of things. And in case you guys are worried about the depleting electric charge levels, I do have 2 RTGs inside this thing, hence why you'll see the electric charge slowly refill itself when we're stationary. And so, Jebediah Kerman, I feel like it was safe to just go for a quick swim in this unknown liquid. As you can see, I think something didn't quite work with something here, because he's actually fully submerged below the surface, and we get an eerie look at the expanse of that deep, deep lake. I don't know how Tekto's depths compare to Kerbin, Eve, and Lathe, their seas. I think the deepest point in the Kerbin system is either on Lathe or Eve. I wish the oceans had more variability. I guess, when they were designed, Squad had no intention of ever putting it, because why would you explore the oceans in a game called Kerbal Space Program? But obviously with Parallax, it adds lots of like fauna and stuff. Oh, not fauna, sorry, flora. Flora is the plants, right? Suddenly having a mind blank. But yeah. So I believe the way the oceans work on like Kerbin, Eve, and Lathe is that they're basically all like flat plains. There aren't really any things like Mariana Trench analogs and stuff like that. So maybe if there ever were to be a Kerbal Space Program 2, they could add kind of trenches and stuff to the bottom of oceans, make that more exciting. But I don't think there'll ever be a KSP 2. What do you guys think? Let me know. So as you can see, I'm sort of trying to think of things to say whilst this flight is taking a very long time, trying to get to the top of this mountain without flipping out and spinning. But I think we've basically done it now. Thank goodness. Lovely little shot of there, Jebediah having the time of his life flying this vehicle that could only really safely be described as a death trap, trying to get down to the surface of the top of this mountain. We've got that big cloud there, and it's raining as well. What do you think that could be? Sulfur, those clouds. They're yellow. So yeah, that's my line of thinking there. And touching down, we can apply the brakes, and Jeb could once again get out and take a little sip of that rain. Don't do that. And I don't know, take a hypothetical surface sample. I think I already took a surface sample from the shoreline, so I can't literally take one. But again, it's all kind of, this is all for fun, right, guys? As I said earlier, we don't actually need any science from this mission. It's all just about having fun, exploring the solar system. And what is KSP if not a game designed for that? And I decided to repack the parachutes here just in case I lost control on the way back to the lander, or we ran out of electric charge. I could just hit the parachute action group and just deploy them and be fine. But I hoped that I wouldn't actually need them. So I'm just time warping here to refill our batteries for the long flight all the way back to the lander. As you can see, it's it's not that far away, but for my flying skills, it is fine. I mean, I can just say Jebediah's flying skills, right? I was AFK during all of this. Jebediah Kerbin, I've played the game for so many hours that Jebediah Kerbin has just gained sentience, So it's all Jebediah's fault. It's just like, it's so bad. I really would like to try more, like build and fly more rotorcraft, because I feel like I'm getting better. I'm learning things. Like I'm definitely not the expert when it comes to designing anything with propellers. So the comments on my Lathe helicopter video were really helpful in teaching me how to build helicopters better and fly them better. Maybe I'll get even more words of wisdom in this video's comment section. And hey, while you're down in the comment section, if you haven't already left a like on the video, I always do appreciate it. It's a really good way of helping the old channel out and the algorithm and all that shebang. And yeah, subscribe if you haven't already as well for weekly KSP videos. And yeah, and there's the lander coming into view now. I'm just trying to think of things to say about watching my flight. I'm like, oh, it's coming together quite nicely. Then suddenly there's just a massive random 360 spin. But we're gliding down fairly well now. Like the blades will sort of act as wings to let us glide a little bit. And there's the lander there. And yes, unlike the Lathe helicopter video, I did not enable any cheats like low crash damage or unbreakable joints. To be fair, I didn't, in case you've not seen the Lathe helicopter video and now think I'm some sort of massive fraud, I did make it very clear in that video that I was using cheats for that helicopter. I showed the cheats being activated. And I can open the cheat menu in just a second here and showcase that no cheats were active for this quadcopter. Or at least I thought I was going to do that. I remember showing it at some point during the recording, and I thought it was just there. Maybe it's when I think actually it might have been when I discovered the RCS pack worked, and I was like, oh my gosh, oh no, please don't say I've had Hack Gravity installed by accident. But no, Hack Gravity was not enabled, neither were any other cheats, so there we are. Now I did want to prove that the ladder worked, and this is where I got to the aforementioned point where the Kerbals couldn't really seem to transition to the next ladder, even though, come on, it's there, you could just do it, Bill Kerman. So yeah, good right? Good thing the RCS packs were. I mean, maybe I really should have tested this ladder system on the Kerbin launch pad, but I just assumed it would work, because why wouldn't it? It's a perfect design. Okay, so we've got our Kerbals back on board the lander. Now we're just going to retract the ladders, close the service bay door, and think about getting back to the mothership. So we're going to set it as our target. Valentina Kerman is starting to get a bit bored and lonely up there, so I'm going to go ahead and get the Kerbals back to her. So I just time warped to what I thought was a good time to take off, and then we can just go ahead and take off. So I didn't really know what I was doing in terms of the ascent. I knew that the atmosphere of Tekto extends really, really far. So I tried to go for a very, very conservative and slow gravity turn because I didn't want to spend too much energy going too fast, too low in the atmosphere, or to then lose that momentum to atmospheric drag as we continue descending. So I don't really know, like I say, what the optimal gravity turn is for Tekto. So don't use this video as a tutorial or anything, unless of course I nailed it, in which case let me know in the comments, and then great, use this as a tutorial. But I don't know if I did. This, like I say, was my first attempt at orbiting Tekto. When I say first attempt, I did test that this lander could actually like ascend from Tekto with fuel to spare. So I did, like, before I filmed this mission, I just cheated it to the surface of Tekto and launched it just to make sure it could do the thing. And it could. But other than that, this is like, I guess, my second ever attempt at launching from Tekto. And hey, look at that. I think I pretty much nailed that intersect just there. We have a 1 kilometer separation from the mothership on our first turn without really needing to do any adjustments. So rather than creating a maneuver node at our apoapsis, I'm instead just going to time warp around to the point where we're at our closest approach to the target, set our nav ball to be relative to target, and then just burn retrograde to the target at that close encounter. So that's what I'm going to do instead of doing the conventional circularization and then doing rendezvous from there. And there we are. We have visual. I got a visual on the mothership. And there we are. So we're just going to do the rest of the docking by eye. Now, I didn't add any RCS thrusters to the lander, which I think was probably a mistake. I guess I just assumed the Delta V numbers would be really close based on the fact that the Delta V map said I would need 2,600 meters per second of Delta V to reach Tekto orbit. But as you can see, I got over 500 meters per second left. So what was my value when I first launched? I'm going to have to go back and check and then use that as my new standard for launch from Tekto. So yeah, like I say, I didn't add monopropellant or RCS thrusters to the lander to save as much fuel as possible, which I guess was all for naught in the end. So because we don't have RCS thrusters on the lander, it's going to be very difficult to get it docked into that kind of awkward parking bay inside that kind of like scaffold frame on the mothership. I guess I didn't need to redock it, like the Kerbols could have just EVA'd across, but I feel like it's a bit more realistic, and I kind of liked the idea of having the lander docked so there would be more kind of usable interior space of the vehicle during its very long journey back to Kerbin. Now, I tried to sort of cheat it and do the Lowne lazy method of docking by having both vessels automatically align themselves, but that didn't really work in this case, so I gotta try and do things manually. So just using the aero spikes to orient our ship so that it could eventually kind of dock with the docking port. Luckily, the docking ports in KSP have really, really powerful magnets, so I can kind of use the power of magnets to draw them close together. So it's still kind of a very awkward and clumsy docking procedure. So you might be wondering why there is a decoupler on this craft that obviously stages the service bay and fuel tank and engines, leaving just the lander can, when in fact that's not going to be the re-entry module, so why would it need to be able to do that? Again, that's just because from my Delta V maps and what from people told me on Discord, I would need lots and lots and lots of Delta V to do any kind of Sarnus mission, so I thought just in case we're running low on fuel and I need a bit more Delta V, I can just stage the kind of unnecessary part of that lander for the journey back to Kerbin, but didn't need to, so I thought, you know, minimize the amount of debris in space, was in like make sure we don't have any debris left in space. I'll keep it all attached, and then we get more things to explode when we re-enter at Kerbin. So first things first, I'm going to time warp around, so when we do a Tekto escape, we're going to be kind of on an eccentric orbit around Sarnus, but our apoapsis around Sarnus, if we do a retrograde burn at periapsis, it lowers our orbit around the sun. Did that sentence make sense? I hope it did. And then, because Sarnus is so far away from Kerbin, we don't really have to worry about transfer windows from Sarnus to Kerbin. We can just do minor adjustments with prograde, retrograde, radial in, radial out, and just force those grey encounter nodes to be close together for very, very little fuel expenditure. I'm not going for anything too accurate at this point because the maneuver nodes get less and less accurate the more burns you're planning. As you can see, I'm forcing those nodes, like I said earlier. Maneuver nodes in KSP aren't always that accurate, and this is a maneuver node that's kind of been plotted on a maneuver node plot, so I'm not going for anything too accurate. I want to make sure it was all, you know, physically possible. And now we can go ahead and perform the first of the two burns. They got a bit of a wobble there from the tail of the vehicle. I'm going to perform the first of our two burns that's going to eject us from the Sarnus system. The first burn, of course, being to eject us from Tekto, and we say goodbye to its lovely little cloudy surface there. Oh, saw a little flash of lightning just there in the clouds, and yeah, I'm deploying the solar panels. I don't think solar panels actually do a great deal. Even the gigantic ones do a great deal this far away from the sun, but you know, from an aesthetic point of view, they look quite nice. And there we are. The burn is pretty much done. So the next burn on the cards is the escape burn from Sarnus. So I guess now the first burn is finished. So yeah, just shy of 700 meters per second of delta V. What do we think, guys? Think I'll be able to do it with a budget of 5,319 meters per second? I wasn't worried at this point that we'd be getting back to Kerbin. And hey, look at that. We have a Kerbin encounter. I just went for a very gross Kerbin encounter. I did bother looking at kind of what course we're taking past Kerbin, because what the maneuver node plot says you'll get and what the burn ends up giving you, they very rarely marry up, especially when we're doing this kind of level of accuracy. So just any old Kerbin encounter is fine. We will then do a correction burn to fine-tune our pass that we enter Kerbin's atmosphere and, capture and land successfully. And now a moment of silence, please. Doesn't Sarnus just look absolutely incredible? So yeah, I can't believe it's taken me this long to use the Outer Planets mod. I guess I was so hopeful that there would be a sequel to Kerbal Space Program that I figured I'd put all my eggs in that basket, but I guess there never was. So now it's time to mod the heck out of Kerbal Space Program. So yeah, now we're just plotting our burn. It's going to take us passing through those lovely rings of Sarnus. Right before the maneuver node is completed, I just close it and do the rest by eye. There's the target indicators there. Watching them slowly get closer and closer. I couldn't zoom in very accurately. And there we are. We have a Kerbin encounter. So now we can go ahead and focus on Kerbin and see what that orbital pass actually looks like. So just manually doing a few burns. I attempted to try and bring our periapsis close to Kerbin using the RCS control. So H and M forwards and backwards, I, J, K, and L for translation. But I just couldn't really do it. So we'll just do a proper burn later on. But there we are, passing just past the rings of Sarnus there. Gosh, ain't it a beautiful thing? And you can just sort of see the big satellite dish actually underneath the lander just there. That's enabled us to maintain connection to the Kerbal Space Center. And now we say goodbye to the Sarnus system. Goodbye, Sarnus. For now, at least, I will be revisiting at some point. I have to do a Slate, was it? That moon that we used to capture us into a Sarnus orbit. And I guess Elu. I don't know if you guys know this, Elu, when you install Outer Planets, becomes a moon of Sarnus rather than remaining as a planet in its own right. Just like in real life, it gets demoted to non-planetary status. So yeah, now, like I said, because I couldn't get the Kerbin atmospheric pass using the RCS controls earlier, I'm now plotting a proper maneuver node to ensure that our periapsis intersects Kerbin's atmosphere and, of course, is low enough so that we generate enough drag for our capsule to, fully capture around Kerbin and decelerate and land. If the periapsis is too high, you won't generate enough drag and you'll end up just exiting the atmosphere and, worst case scenario, entering interplanetary space again, where you'd need to call on the Blunderbirds. But luckily, that did not happen in this mission. So just reorienting the spacecraft to perform that inclination change required to intersect Kerbin's atmosphere, as it's only going to cost us a mere 42.9 meters per second. So wow, I think could this be the most over-budgeted Delta V mission I've ever done. I don't think I've ended up coming up with a craft with so much Delta. I think it's got more than half. Oh no, it hasn't got more than half its fuel, but it has more than half of its original Delta V. I think it has then 7,800 meters per second, and now it's got 4,588 meters per second remaining, which is over half of 7,800. So yeah, I'm just saying, I brought way too much fuel. I'm so sorry, guys. But now you see, when I design my next Tekto craft, if I ever were to do that, I could just look at this video and be like, right, I started with this much Delta V, I ended up with this much, and so that means that I need X amount, and same for the lander. So this, it's a learning experience. I'm pretty sure my channel started off my first ever EVE mission I ever did in real life. The first EVE EVE mission I did as a player of Kerbal Space Program, I filmed for my channel. It was in October 2015, and it was a terrible video. I think I might have unlisted it, in fact, because I felt oh, people are going to come to this channel looking for advice on how to play the game, and this video is terrible for that. But maybe it's still up, I don't know. I definitely deleted my first Moho video because that really was awful, awful advice for getting to Moho. Anyway, we're doing the re-entry. See how I used the launch escape thrusters to get us clear of the mothership, which is just as well because it is currently exploding into a million pieces up ahead, giving us a lovely fireworks show for our re-entry. And yeah, I have 800 units of ablator on this thing, but I didn't need anywhere close to that because the ablative heat shields in Kerbal Space Program are so OP. So re-entry is an absolute dream. Whenever I do an SSTO, it's always like a real rude awakening where I'm like, oh no, now I actually have to make sure I have a realistic re-entry profile so the thing doesn't explode. But you don't have to worry about that for this video. And, you know, I say this video is, of course, rapidly coming to a close as we pass through the cloud layer of Kerbin, ready to splash down in the water below us. And yeah, it was kind of like a suicide burn landing almost, because parachute didn't really deploy. We're going very fast. Oh, it's all fine. We decelerated right before the right before splashdown, or less, right before oceanic impact would have been a better description at the velocity we were going at until right the very last second. And ready, guys, we're going to splash down. And there we are. Which therefore concludes today's... Oh, little bolt of lightning in the distance there. That concludes today's mission and therefore today's video. Thank you so much for making it this far. It was a bit of a long one, wasn't it? And a huge thanks if your name is on the right-hand side of the screen, my Patreon and YouTube channel member supporters who make all of this content possible. If your name is there, you have my eternal gratitude. Thank you so much. But yeah, thanks for watching, everyone, this video, and I'll see you in the next one.